So episode 3 stopped off where I had come to that decision that I just didn't want to live like that. That waking up with that feeling in my chest, that burping, all of that that was going on, I wanted something different, right? And so I had to take an honest look at what I was doing, the things I was integrating into my life, and figure out how to go from there. The standard advice that's given for managing reflux, GERD, is centered around lean animal protein. But the truth is, I was already doing those things. In fact, I had made such transitions in my daily regimen that I was doing organic, lean protein. I was doing whole foods, integrating some amount of whole foods into my regimen. Like I'd already made the switch from white rice to brown rice, but not only brown rice, but different types of grains, exploring different grains to include into my daily regimen. Mm? Okay, you want to get off and go somewhere else? All right. Did you enjoy this one? All right. I'm a mom. I go out for my walking, and today we decided to stop at this park per someone's request. And now let's see. So I had already made all those switch and was starting to look truly at how I could live better, right? So eating earlier, giving my body ample time to digest food before going to sleep and all that. But I kept searching, right? Knowing that there must be something else. I tried a ketogenic diet. I quickly realized that was not for me. Yeah, I did not like the feelings of that. I think I tried it for a week, and yeah. So I tried a ketogenic diet. I tried an alkaline diet, and like I mentioned in my previous video, I included here where I shared I was trying going vegan for 21 days. So I did that. And along the line, as you discover more things, you start developing and learning what works, what doesn't work, what the research is saying, what the long-term proof is, and all that. So mind you, there were other things going on simultaneously in my life, because life is never one dimensional where it's just one thing happening, right? So I came across this individual, and she was into supplements and selling supplements. So I decided to give it a look to see. That's how I started looking more into supplements and what they could do, how they impacted health, right? So probiotics, digestive enzyme, probiotics, things for sleep, for mood, like natural alternatives to synthetic formulas, right? Mm? Okay, more. Okay. So natural alternatives to synthetic formulas or whatever else was there. So I started those, including those into my regimen too, and I could tell the difference, right? But along the path of that, I realized that again, I wanted to deep down learn and figure out how to tailor my life, how to develop a lifestyle that was sustainable for the results I wanted to maintain. Nothing against supplements per se, but after they've helped me to calm down and to get things back under control, I wanted long-term sustainability. So I had to, now I started looking at, well, how can I achieve the same results through my lifestyle, through how I was leading my lifestyle. And that's when I started venturing out to learn how different foods impact the body and the different benefits that it could have long term on it. And with that, I went on this journey of transitioning, to a whole food plant based lifestyle, because the evidence was speaking for itself in all the benefits that was going along with the different foods that I was including or not including in my regimen, right? So then I realized that things that should be paramount in my daily regimen were like side dishes, right? They weren't the main course. They weren't the star of the show for whenever I was preparing my meal. So I had to rethink how I was making that approach and go from there. And the easiest way to do that was to follow a whole food, plant based lifestyle. And of course, once you get down that rabbit hole of looking into things that are more whole, then I realized that a lot of other areas of my life could also use some adjustments, like things I was putting on my body and things I was using in my mouth and all that. That story for another day, right? So today I'm going to share with you the 5 of those foods that I started implementing into my regimen on a daily basis to help regulate my system, to give me those lasting results that I was looking for, that I knew I could get without relying heavily on supplements on a day-to-day basis. So that's what this episode is about. Those 5 foods, the clinical evidence behind it, and my journey to figuring it out. So like I mentioned, most of the information that I got earlier on was centered around lean animal protein, right? But I was already doing that and I was still having issues. So what else was it that was going on that I needed to address? But with the transition that I was making, there was no lean animal protein in there. And a lot of times, the foods that I had started including in my regimen, the information that was being presented on that is that those are not things that you should include in your regimen because they could lead to gas and bloating. And it would just stop there. It didn't go beyond explaining why you would have gas or bloating from that and how to approach it differently to have lasting, sustainable results with it. Let me know in the comments if you've ever eaten something like lentil and you experience bloating or anything of the sort with that. Because the truth is, the research on plant based eating and GERD is actually more compelling than most clinical guidelines would reflect or give it credit for. And by the end of this episode, you will understand why a whole food plant based diet is not just manageable with hiatal hernia, it may be actively and advantageous. So, one of the big questions that comes up when one thinks of a whole food plant based diet is, so where do you get your protein, right? And of course, that is a general misconception that we're going to explore some of that today. So we're going to look at what the research actually says about that. So this exploration, that this pathway I went on, mind you, this was after I started having those symptoms relating to acid reflux, GERD, gastritis, and all of that culminating to the point that I wanted something different. Some of it was prior to me being diagnosed with having a hiatal hernia, and some of it was things I learned after the fact, right? And started integrating into my regimen. The research that was being generated or presented for information surrounding a whole food plant based diet helped to solidify the choices that I'd started making in my day to day life, right? And so that's a part of the reason when I went to the doctor, when I went to my gastroenterologist, because of the research I was doing and the information I was getting, I asked, what are some of the foods that I can eat? What are some of the things I can do to be accountable and to take responsibility and to take care of the situation? And again, like I mentioned before, the response was, if you don't take this medication, you'll be back in my office. I'm sure you'll be back in my office, right? And this is something, all of us have this, and we'll just have to live with it for the rest of our lives. You'll just have to deal with it for the rest of your life. So yes, that's true to an extent. If you continue to do the things that aggravate your system to produce those results, of course you're going to continuously have it for the rest of your life if you continue along the path that generates that. But if you make the changes that takes away those factors from aggravating your body to induce reflux and to induce your body flaring up and you having gastritis, and to take away the buildup of pressure that's there from you getting a hiatal hernia, then that will not be the portion. My assessment was, or my interpretation was, if I remove those factors, then I should not be dealing with this for the rest of my life, right? Especially if I am take accountability in how I was making daily choices that would impact the outcome in the end. So again, this is my personal account. This is not me telling you to not listen to your doctor. This is not me telling you to stop your medication. Yes, my darling. You want to go to another park? Okay, we can go to another park. So this is not me telling you not to listen to your doctor, not to take the medication or anything like that. Okay? This is just my personal account. Yes, my darling. Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit of the science for GERD management when it comes to legumes. There was a cross-sectional study that was published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health that examined some individuals, about 300 adults, a little over 300 adults. What this study found was that GERD likelihood was significantly and inversely correlated with legume, nuts, and seed intake. So what that means is that the higher the consumption, the lower the risk of GERD. Essentially, was that what that meant? Not a higher risk of GERD, but a lower risk of GERD. So this wasn't the exact information I found at the time that compelled me to change my course or make a decision. But as I find these research, I wanted to bring that to you because there is research out there, or clinical studies out there rather, that speaks to this. And so that's why I'm sharing this. All right. And of course, at the time, I didn't have anyone who was making the connection like this between the issues I was having and the foods that would help with that. And so again, that's a part of me doing this, right? To showcase the everyday choices that was creating mayhem for me, and the decisions I made to get other results than what I was getting. All right. So with the information from the study, what it showed again is that there was reduced risk of having GERD when you had higher consumption of legumes. This is through multiple pathways. The first is that legumes are low in fat. And I didn't explore a lot of that in my previous video, but fat is not your friend when it comes to reflux, right? So first, legumes are low in fat, which means they do not trigger the CCK release that relaxes the LES, or the lower esophageal sphincter, the way that fatty animal protein does. This is not to say that you should not consume fat. Fat is very important, right? But you want to be mindful of the type of fat you're consuming, for one, and two, your frequency and the amount that you're taking in, right? So just something to consider if you're having this issue. If you're not having this issue of reflux or any of the symptoms with it, and you're fine doing what you're doing, then you have no need to reconsider, right? But if you're looking for different, then you have to think about doing something differently. Second beneficial effect of legumes is that the soluble fiber in beans and lentils promote healthy gastric motility and reduces transit time. So that's the amount of time that food takes to move through your stomach, from the time you eat it to the time you poop it out, essentially. So the stomach operates more efficiently, reducing the window for reflux. And the third way that it operates is that legumes are associated with a healthier gut microbiome composition. So this in itself reduces systemic inflammation, which drives esophageal irritation. Some examples of what you can include are things like white beans, cannella beans, navy beans, lentils. These are amongst the best tolerated food for people with GERD, and it's lower in oligosaccharides that causes gas compared to like chickpeas or black beans. So how do you avoid gas or reduce the gas effect? You can soak beans, you can soak the dry beans and discard the soaking water. Then ensure that you cook it thoroughly. This significantly reduces the gas producing compounds. So there's one important caveat that I want to mention. The bloating concern with beans is real for many people, particularly those who are transitioning from a low fiber to a high fiber way of eating. So the key here is to make gradual increase. Cook your beans thoroughly. Start with the varieties that are easily tolerated. So again, like the lentils and white beans. Moving to chickpeas or kidney beans or things like that quickly can cause gas. So if you jump to like consuming a lot of kidney beans or chickpeas, this may cause gas issues, right? Because your gut simply doesn't have the bacteria that are necessary for breaking down these beans. And you need to allow your body ample time to develop that ability to do that. If not, you're going to have gas. And that's just the plain and simple truth. One of the ways you can incorporate this is to have like a white vegetable soup. What that means is that you include things like navy beans, cannella beans, white beans, all those beans that are more tolerable for starting with. You can include those, and let me tell you the honest truth, that is some of the most delicious soup you can have, having those white bean soup, right? There is this restaurant that was close to us, and one of their menu, their top selling item, was a 99-cent bean soup, and that soup was hands down delicious, right? And it was white beans that they had in there, and it was good. So I make white bean soup, and it is very good. Let's just say that. All right. So that's way that you can have it, and or you can have it like a stew and put it over your favorite grains, whether it's brown rice, quinoa, barley, buckwheat. There's so many varieties of grains, right? So you can have it over that, or with mashed potatoes. Um, and that's something else we'll talk more extensively about too. But you can have that. So you want to cook it slowly, ensure that it's soft and easily digestible. This is one of the meals that can easily be a go-to meal throughout the week. So now we're going to talk about another protein source, and this one can be controversial sometimes because it's either you like it or you don't, right? But at first, when you try it, you may not like it depending on how it's prepared. But if it's prepared properly, it's hands down good. And as you can probably guess, we're talking about tofu, right? So at first, when I tried it, I have to tell you, for breakfast scramble, it was not my thing. It was just not the thing that I would go to. In fact, I preferred having pumpkin seed scramble instead. So pumfu, that's like tofu being made from pumpkin seed. It's literally in the shape of a, yeah, you would find a tofu, but it's simply just pumpkin seed, blended pumpkin seed. And a picture I'll include it so you can see here how I would prepare that for breakfast. So I started having a lot of pumpkin seed for breakfast, and pumpkin seeds are also high in fat. So earlier when I said, fat's not bad, it's not about um, hiding from fat, it's being selective and intentional with the fats that you're consuming, so it's not be doing more harm than good. So I had to learn how to make tofu. And to be honest, for the longest time when I transitioned into a whole food plant-based meal or way of living, I did not have tofu. I would have lentils, I would have varieties of other beans, and I would have tofu instead of tofu. After a while, I discovered different ways that I could prepare tofu that was actually pretty good. And now we have more tofu on a consistent basis now. And there are just so many ways to do it. Like once you figure it out, you're golden. Why is tofu an optimal protein for hiatal hernia? Well, tofu itself contains about 10 to 20 grams of complete protein. That means it has all the amino acids with a fat profile that does not trigger CCK mediated lower esophageal relaxation that high fat animal protein sources would produce. So, unlike animal protein, tofu has documented anti inflammatory properties and isoflavonoids. And the isoflavonoids in soy have been shown to reduce inflammation markers in the GI tract. A 4-ounce serving of firm tofu is low in acid, low fat, and well tolerated by most people with GERD when compared with acidic marinades or high fat sauces. There was an Italian study that was done, and what it found is that those who ate soy, legumes, seeds had reduced incidences of GERD compared to all other dietary patterns, including vegetarians who consume dairy, right? So preparation matters significantly when it comes to tofu. You can bake it, steam it, stir fry it without adding any additional oil. You can add a bit of ginger to spruce it up or some low sodium soy sauce. All of this are relatively safe when it comes to GERD. So tofu can also be marinated in lemon juice or served with um, tomato-based sauce once you're able to reintroduce that into your regimen, and then cooked for a delicious meal. So here's something else that I want to also mention. One of the things that I did too was to cut out dairy, because, and that was for many reasons. The first reason had to do with my son being constipated from that, and we had to cut that out years later. But we're still doing cheese and different things like that at one point. And then once realizing the negative effect it was having overall on us, we made a transition to not consume that. Dairy protein, even low fat dairy, is associated with delayed gastric emptying and prolonged acid exposure in some researches. And the other thing to that is a lot of people of my ethnic background, right? We are lactose intolerant. And that's something that I found to be shockingly alarming, especially at the point where my son kept having constipation issues, and we were doing Miralax and suppositories and different things like that. I kept questioning and questioning and questioning his pediatrician, that it was finally told that, hey, probably should not give him dairy. And that's when we looked into it and found out that our population of people have higher incidences of not being able to tolerate dairy, right? And so that in itself is a whole different story. But that's part of a reason too why we eliminated dairy from our regimen for that purpose. So when it comes to snacking, that wasn't an issue, because in general, you know that you should try to make healthier alternatives. So you eat apple instead of Doritos or something else, Cheetos or whatever it is. You make those choices and you know that they're healthy. So that wasn't snacking wasn't like a a big issue. And to be frank, I wasn't like a super big snacker, anyways. More the main meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. That was the general gist of what I was doing. So that wasn't an honestly wasn't an issue for me. And so when it came to that, it was just about what handful of nuts am I going to carry, or what am I going to have to snack on? What fruit am I going to take to snack on instead? And like I mentioned, pumpkin seeds before in the form of pumpfu, pumpkin seeds are a great snack to have on hand too, because they have 7 to 9 grams of protein per 30 grams of serving. Hello. It also has zinc, iron, and most relevant for hiatal hernia, it has magnesium. Magnesium is involved in smooth muscle function, including smooth muscle of the lower esophageal sphincter. And magnesium deficiency is also associated with lower esophageal sphincter dysfunction and can worsen the symptoms of GERD. Pumpkin seeds are one of the richest dietary sources when it comes to magnesium that's available in whole food form. The fat profile of pumpkin seed is predominantly unsaturated fat. So omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids with anti-inflammatory properties. And it does not produce the same CCK, lower esophageal relaxation response as saturated fat. They are also neutral to alkaline forming in the body, low acid, and high portability. So it's easy to carry on for a snack essentially. What does the research say about plant-based eating and GERD? The 2023 survey that was done of over 4,000 Italian individuals following a whole food plant-based diet who had reduced incidences of GERD when compared to all other patterns of eatings that were examined. Morning. Mediterranean, vegetarian, omnivore, all of that was done, and it showed reduced incidences of GERD in those individuals. There was also a 2024 cross-sectional study which found that GERD likelihood was inversely associated with plant-based food consumption and positively associated with animal product consumption. So particularly organ meats and food high in animal fat. So what that looks like is you having better results when you eat plant-based food as it relates to GERD. You're not likely to develop that or have that issue. This is as a result of several simultaneous pathways. So you have lower dietary fat intake overall, which reduces CCK mediated lower esophageal sphincter relaxation, right? You have high fiber, which promotes faster gastric emptying pathways and lower dietary fats. High fiber, which promotes faster gastric emptying and reduces the opportunity for reflux. The phytonutrient and antioxidant density of plant food reduces the chronic esophageal inflammation driven by acid exposure. And the gut microbiome composition of whole food plant based eaters is consistently richer in beneficial bacteria that is associated with lower GERD symptom frequency. This does not mean that whole food plant-based diet or whole food plant-based prevents hiatal hernia or cures it. What it means is that the dietary pattern is strictly aligned with everything evidence-based GERD management asks for. Low fat, high fiber, anti-inflammatory, gut microbiome supporting. So for someone who eats whole food plant-based diet like myself, this is not just about managing my condition through food choices, right? It's about eating in a pattern that evidence suggests is mechanically protective against those things. And so that's part of the reason I stick with it. So I want to be clear about these research that I just mentioned. So the observational and cross-sectional studies, what they show is association, not causation, right? So a whole food plant-based diet does not treat a structural hiatal hernia. The hernia is mechanical. It's the gap in the diaphragm, and no dietary pattern repairs that gap, right? So you have a natural gap that is in your diaphragm. Changing the way you eat is not going to close that gap. What the evidence shows is that whole food plant-based pattern of eating is associated with lower GERD symptom burden. And given what we know about mechanism, fat, fiber, gut microbiome, the lower esophageal sphincter, and esophageal inflammation, those associations are biologically plausible. So the good news is for dietary choices, it show there is evidence to suggest that when you make intentional food choices, you can have positive results based on how the food affects changes within your body, whether it triggers a symptom or it doesn't, or whether it has a propensity to trigger a symptom or not. So, what does a whole food plant based diet look like for me on a week to week basis? It typically starts off with oatmeal, believe it or not. Oatmeal with fruits, berries, and then I may occasionally have a cup of tea, but usually berries and water in the morning, first thing to start off. And then for lunch, honestly, it just depends on what's available. Sometimes it may be beans with grains and greens. So I always try to have a lot of vegetables with my meals. And I'll put examples here to show typically what that looks like. But typically, a lot of veggies, a lot of veggies, a lot of veggies. Then there's beans, always some sort of beans. It could be in the form of tofu or pamfu or other legumes, lentils or chickpeas, red kidney beans, or different things of that sort. So, a variety of beans, right? And again, if you are new to this, you're going to want to start off slow, because if you don't start off slow and give your body the time to build up the good gut bacteria that are necessary for breaking down these foods, then you may be prone to getting gas if you're not mindful of that. So going slow and building up slowly is something that can help over time. So that's typically what it starts off as. And then for dinner, again, it's a repeated variation of lunch. So it may be have pizza, right? But it's whole food plant-based pizza. So a key thing that I should mention that I don't think I made clear when I started this, one of the key takeaways that I got from this was being intentionally mindful about the different ingredients that I was consuming on a day to day basis. So, like I mentioned, pizza just now. For a lot of people, they would think, oh, pizza, you can't have pizza. Well, actually, you can. You just have to be intentional about what the base of your pizza is. So, for me, what I did was I started using einkorn flour to make pizza. And einkorn is an ancient grain that is easily digested. It's not hybridized. It doesn't have all these issues that you would typically get when you eat other forms of flour. The ingredients matter. And like I mentioned before, I still include things that are high fat into my regimen. Pamfu has a high amount of fat. Tofu, cashews, nuts are high in fat. I include those in my regimen. So just being intentional about the different ingredients that I was using to prepare my meal regularly. So I'd have pizzas, I would have sweet potato dumplings. We love that. We love hot chocolate, but instead of using store-bought chocolate, I use, instead of doing the store-bought chocolate, what I do is get cacao that is minimally processed. And for sweeteners, I do dates for sweeteners. And for milk, I do cashew. And again, cashew is high in fat, right? But that's how we make our hot chocolate, quote unquote, hot chocolate. So I want to say this clear for anyone on a plant based diet who is having issues. Granted, I made the switch to a plant based diet when I was having issues, right? But if you're already on a plant based diet and you're having issues and you're being told that you need more protein, I would just say you want to be intentional about what you're including in your diet. So you can't just be having Pepsis and Oreo because they're vegan, right? You have to look at the substance of the ingredients that goes into the things that you're eating and be intentional to include things that are nourishing and that will give you the value benefit that you need, the nutrition that you need, the nourishment that you need, because that's what our bodies need to function. Evidence does not support that when you eat a plant-based diet that you're lacking in protein. In fact, what it shows is that legumes, such legumes, tofus, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds, these are not compromises. They are not plant-based versions of settling for less. The evidence suggests that these are actually better for your conditions that you may have, rather than consuming high-fat animal protein. And that standard GERD advice typically plans to you having animal products. And you may think, okay, where am I going to get my protein if I'm not eating animal products? Well, plants are the basic origin for protein. So if you're eating a variety of plant foods, it's almost impossible for you to be protein deficient. You would literally have to not be eating any plants in order to run into that problem. All right, so variety is the key, and having a variety of foods, regardless of your dietary preference, having a variety is always going to be key to having optimal results. So, lots of vegetables, a variety of fruits, variety of beans, variety of grains, variety of greens, variety of cruciferous, and just being intentional to nourish your body. If you are truly nourishing your body, it's hard to go wrong. Not only nourishing your body, but also being intentional to be mindful about the things that are stressing you, right? Sometimes you're going through your day and your body's just like so tense. You haven't taken a moment to breathe. You haven't relaxed your diaphragm. You haven't relaxed your gut. You haven't relaxed your shoulders. You're just in a tightened state walking around all day. Like, take time to breathe. That simple action alone can make a world of difference. All right. So, in the next episode, I'm going to be sharing about exercises, and particularly one of the exercises I did in my regimen that helped with hiatal hernia. So, if you haven't yet, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this with someone who may not have yet connected the dots, and this could potentially be helpful for them in their situation. All right. So again, this is not medical advice. This is my personal experience and research that I've come across that I'm sharing with you. There is a free hiatal hernia calculator in the description. You can check that out to get an idea as to where you are as far as your symptoms in that area. And then I'm building a community. So if you'd like to join that, there's going to be information that on that as well for you to be a part of that community if that's your desire, to do that and to have some accountability and support in making changes that could potentially yield lead to you having persistent positive results. All right.